Trent Bowman getting some work done today. If you're watching a show like this or listening to a show like this, you already know that Trent Frederic and Max Jones are now members of the Edmonton Oilers. Not that we're the show of record, but Zach, you want to throw out the trade board real quick so we're all on the same page about what happened today? With more trades on the horizon, Edmonton getting some work done here. It's the end of the Frederic era in Boston. I still remember that draft and talking to someone from the Bruins on the draft floor after it was done, because the Bruins took Trent Frederic in the first round. This is 2016, the Austin Matthews draft in Buffalo. And a lot of people thought, like, you know what? You can probably get Trent Frederic in the second round. And this person from Boston told me, now we had intel. Boston was drafting 30th and Anaheim was drafting 31st. And the intel they got was that Anaheim was going to take him 31st, so they jumped up one to grab him. Anaheim ended up taking Sam Steele with the 31st pick. Anyhow, apropos of nothing, I wanted to share with everybody my favorite Trent Frederic story. Story time will kick off the show here. Greg Wyshynski stands by here in a couple of moments. We'll get to Greg, and there'll be plenty of trade talk today. But this is something for Oilers fans out there, something for Oilers Nation. So 2019, Zach had some homework here, so he's got the videos all queued up. There was an incident between the Providence Bruins, where Trent Frederic was playing, it's American Hockey League, folks, and the Springfield Falcons. Tommy Cross was a defenseman for... Thunderbirds. I apologize. Thunderbirds. Tommy Cross was a defenseman for Springfield, and in a game against Providence early in 2019, he catches Cameron Hughes with this neutral zone elbow to the head. Oh, it's a bad one. Oh, it's a real tough one. Have a look at it again. Clear elbow to the head. Infuriating the Providence Bruins. Now to kick off the second period, surprise, surprise, Trent Frederic goes after Tommy Cross of Springfield. We'll have a quick look at this one. Trent Frederic makes the beeline off the draw, grabs him. We're going. You have no choice. I'm going to pull the veteran move of getting my arm out of my jersey and then starting to feed you. It's actually a great move that Tom Wilson mastered, but nonetheless. So at that point, Trent Frederic had only had 2 fights in the American League up until that game. And the rule in the American Hockey League is you start to get suspended after your 10th fight. And so Frederic says to Tommy Cross, in one of my favorite lines that I've ever heard one person say to someone else on the ice, or in this case, the penalty box, he said, "Tommy, I've got 7 fights left, and I'm using them all on you. All season long, I'm only going to fight you, Tommy Cross." Edmonton, congratulations. You are the proud members of a slightly bruised, slightly damaged right now, but nonetheless, shiny new Trent Frederic along with Max Jones. Let's get to what's coming up on the program here today, Zacharola. It is Daily Outlines presented by FanDuel, North America's #1 sportsbook app provider. By the way, what'd you think of that line, by the way? I got 7 fights left, and I'm going to use them all on you.
Unreal line. The only thing I may have to do here, Jeff, and I hate to do this to you, I might have to fact check if it was the same game. I noticed something on the score clocks.
Oh, was it
that fight was at the start of the second period. The hit was about 5 minutes into the second period. So it might have been different games here. But I would imagine that would probably have to do with Tommy Cross getting kicked out of that game. But I can do some fact checking. But if that were to be the case.
Report back, soldier. Okay, so Greg Wyshynski is aboard on the program today from ESPN. We will get to Greg here in a couple of moments. Also on the program, mentioning Trent Frederic. Listen, we know that the Edmonton Oilers are looking for a couple of things here. They wanted to get tougher in their bottom 6. They did. Also looking for a left shot defenseman. I personally wonder. I really, really wonder about someone like Carson Soucy. We'll see where that ends up. And speaking of fights, Tkachuk and Wilson went last night in the Ottawa-Washington game, a game won by the Washington Capitals. We will mention the anthem thing with Brady Tkachuk, and I do wonder. There's one thing that I wonder about that fight specifically. Anthem followed, as I mentioned, continues. We'll talk about Brady's expression as the faithful booed the U.S. national anthem, as they're doing from coast to coast here in Canada. Do we have Wyshynski standing by?
Indeed, we do.
We do. Let's get to him right now. Here he is, our good friend from ESPN.com, our Tuesday staple, the one and only Greg Wyshynski. Hello, Greg.
This is a teachable moment for young Zach.
What is it?
Well, like, they didn't stop Animal House when Bluto said that the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. they just let him roll. You have to understand that Marek's memory is of moments, but much like a quilt in a wood chipper, the patchwork has come undone. The threads are all there. The material is all there, but the patchwork has come undone. Yeah. So you just have to roll with it sometimes. I learned that myself over the years during Marek versus Wyshynski. And now I see in the latest incarnation of your podcasting empire, the rule still holds.
What do you make of that line? I have 7 fights left. I'm using them all on you.
It's great. It's fantastic. It's the kind of thing that makes hockey, doesn't it?
And now that kind of hockey is going into Edmonton. By the way, I wanted to show you something. We'll start the show off by talking about players that are involved in this trade. So I've already mentioned Trent Frederic. I want to get your thoughts on him. Now a member of the Edmonton Oilers. I also want to show you something. So Max Jones is another piece of this deal. I've always had a soft spot for Max Jones. I've always, this. Like I've always liked Max Jones.
Clearly, you're not a Boston Bruins fan, then.
I understand that. I've always liked Max Jones, and one of the reasons why I've always liked Max Jones is he was involved in, for my money, the best celly I've ever seen after a goal. Now we're going junior hockey here.
All right,
I'm sorry, Wish. We're going junior hockey. We're going London Knights. I worked this game. I think it was is London either against Niagara or London against Flint. I can't recall, but nonetheless, Cliff Pooh, the old Buffalo Sabres third rounder, scores a goal. Remember Cliffy?
Jeff Stever trade.
Yeah, that's right, Cliff Pooh. Yeah, he used to work out at our gym. He used to see Cliffy there all the time. So Cliff Pooh scores a goal. Max Jones is line mate. Look at that celebration. The handshake. The gentleman's celebration, the handshake to Max Jones. Like, honestly, I just love that celebration. Zach, can we show it one more time? Because I just love making Greg laugh. And anybody watching in the chat.
It's so silly. It's like
they
just closed closed a bank loan.
Just closed a business deal.
That's tremendous.
The gentleman's celebration, the handshake between Cliff Pooh and Max Jones.
Now, why is it that I'm so enthusiastic about the handshake goal celebration, but so against the post-game handshake?
I'm the same way.
I don't know if that's hypocritical. Maybe it's like it's like fighting. Like the best fights are unexpected. Maybe the best handshakes are unexpected.
No, but that's a handshake between the same team. That's not Cliff Pooh and going to shake the hand of someone on the other squad. That is your own team. Point. Like if you just think, how about this for ultimate arrogance? For a handshake after a series? What if you just did a line and only shook your own teammates' hands? Like you did it along the blue line. You did it along the blue line and then skated off as everybody else is standing at center ice.
That's preferable to the sadistic emasculation of your opponent, forcing them to shake your hand in fealty after dispatching them and ruining their lives and destroying their dreams. Here, come shake the hand of your oppressor, you miserable losers.
There were a lot of people that didn't like handshakes, most famously Stan Mikita, Billy Smith, Kelly Rudy had talked previously about not liking them as well. So there are plenty of members on that Detroit Red Wings squad that weren't too thrilled to shake the hand of Claude Lemieux. Trust me, in that Detroit Red Wings.
Or you know, when what was it, Milan Lucic, who went through the entire line of Montreal Canadiens saying, "I'm going to murder you, I'm going to murder you, I'm going to murder you." After the
good game, good game.
Handshakes,
good game,
folks.
F you, good. Yeah, I know.
Great.
What do you make of this deal? I don't think, and none of us think that Stan Bowman is done shopping here. There's still a left-hand shot defenseman they're looking for, and some would say they should be, although I don't know if they are, looking for a goaltender.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I love the double retention of it all for Edmonton because obviously with the Evander Kane situation, they have a certain amount of financial uncertainty heading into this deadline. So to pull Frederic, who, I mean, you know, if you're talking about players on expiring contracts, in particular centers, at this deadline. He's definitely top 5 of the guys that are available as far as pending UFAs. So the double retention makes it pretty good. It's not like they didn't give up a bit, though. I mean, the defenseman they gave up to Boston, I think has struggled in his sophomore year, but is certainly, sophomore season, I should say, sophomore season in the AHL, but I think has some upside. He had a couple of injury situations, I guess, this year. LaChance, he's a big body on the wing, doesn't skate very well, but is a captain at BU. Again, let it never be said that hockey is not a land of nepotism. To have
whatever are you talking about?
Shane LaChance acquired by the team where his father, Scott LaChance, is the head of U.S. scouting.
Yeah, scout.
What are we even doing here?
Hold on a second.
Yeah,
he's a legendary Islander / Blue Jacket / Montreal Canadian. Yeah. You watch Scott LaChance your whole life.
Legendary Islander, just like the Devils GM. So the other thing, but all joking aside, like if the Devils can acquire a college prospect that has some upside, if he can ever figure out his skating for what was it, like $585,000, I think it ends up being. You probably do that deal. The retention part of it's interesting, though, because the Devils still have about $2.8 million available at the deadline. But like the minute you saw the Devils as the third wheel in this Frederic trade between Boston and Edmonton, Marek, was your first thought not, they know they're going to have $8 million in cap space coming free within the next few days because of the Jack Hughes situation?
Listen, I'm crossing my fingers and hoping no, and I'm hoping that like all of a sudden he, Tom Fitzgerald, as we've said before on this and other shows, Greg, he gets sent to Lourdes to bathe in holy water and he comes back healed, and all of a sudden miraculously Jack Hughes is back in the lineup for the New Jersey Devils, but I don't think that's going to be the play. I did think that. I'm sick of. Listen, I'm just fed up with. Again, like it's hockey. Things are going to happen. I just can't stand watching Jack Hughes. You can't stand anybody smashing into the boards like that. We've just seen it too many times. Seeing Jack Hughes. Seeing Jack Hughes do like the belly flop into the boards. It's just crushing.
We'll get to the Frederic impact on the Oilers in a sec, but Devil's sidebar, he's been their offense. It's kind of insane how they finally figured out their goaltending. Even when Markstrom was out, their goaltending was still top 6 in the league, I think, in save percentage. Yeah. And then their offense went in the toilet. Their 5-on-5 shooting percentage dropped from 10th last season to 18th this season. Hughes has been their offense throughout the entire season. They're not really getting much out of their bottom 6. I don't know if his injury changes what they wanted to do at the deadline insofar as acquiring a center. I think that's where they were headed anyway. But, if he's out long term, and again, as we do this podcast, we don't know. We just know he's back in Jersey getting evaluated.
Yep.
What do you do if you're them? Do you kind of just put your head down and be like, we're in a playoff spot, we should just try to push ahead and maybe he comes back in the postseason? Or does this reorient everything you're going to do insofar as a trade deadline?
I think they still go for it. For it because what's the most important member of your hockey team?
Your goaltender.
And they got it. And he's playing good. I don't know. I'm still very much of the mind, as much as people are really down on the New Jersey Devils, 82 games a long season. I know that they haven't, lit the NHL on fire, but there's still a lot of there that I would look at them and say, look, this is still a really good team. And as much as, Florida just got better by bringing in Seth Jones. Tampa, even though they lost to Florida yesterday, are coming off a rip that almost got to 10 games. They're looking really good. Who knows what you're getting with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but no one's running away with this thing. Running away with this thing in the Eastern Conference. And you know what happens in the playoffs, and you know what happens when you can ride a hot goalie in the playoffs. I would not be one of those throw in the towel people. Especially not when you've got Simon Nemec sitting there as a trade piece.
Yeah. It's an interesting question they're going to have to answer because Sunday against Vegas was one of the first times they had Hischier, Hughes, and Markstrom all in the lineup at the same time in a long time this year. That being said, since the turn of the calendar, they played like dog shit. There's no way to sugarcoat the fact that whatever the Devils built, it worked at the beginning of the season, and then it stopped working at some point during the season. Maybe that's injuries. Maybe that's Markstrom. I don't know what it is, but they haven't looked like the same team. So I do wonder internally what their ultimate evaluation of this year is, separate from the Hughes injury, and whether the Hughes injury ends up just being like the thing that clinches how they feel about the season, because they're in danger of not making the playoffs right now, which is not something I don't think any of us thought we'd say about the Devils back in like November.
Nope.
What do you think, though? Do you think they get across the line even if Hughes isn't there?
I still believe there's enough quality there for them too.
Yeah.
Like really, I know the game's not played on paper, but when you look at the New Jersey Devils, do you say to yourself, yeah, that's an outside looking in team? No. I was looking at the New Jersey Devils at the beginning of the season and said, no, not in theory. I mean, there's always surprise teams that just fall out of it and surprise teams that jump in. But that wasn't a team that I looked at the beginning of the season and said, like, nah, not enough there. As a matter of fact, I was looking at this team and I was saying to myself, like, this is a team that could win the division.
I thought they could potentially win the cup. I think I had them playing for the cup against Dallas in actuality. I think part of the problem for Jersey and to a lesser extent Carolina has been the rest of the conference kind of figuring themselves out over time. Like the Blue Jackets continue to progress. Detroit makes the coaching change. They get right back into it. The Rangers, obviously, as Shesterkin has played better, are right back in it in wild card position. It's I don't know. It's interesting times in Jersey. Frederic.
Let's get to Frederic and Edmonton because that's the biggie
let me
here.
mention.
Let me just say one thing.
Yeah,
sure. Have you noticed at all? I mean, we see it every now and then, and whenever we see it, we always get our backs up and say, like, get some muscle around this guy. Have you seen a pronounced effort from other teams in the Western Conference specifically to take advantage physically of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl? That's what we're talking about.
But
here.
that's always what they do, though. Like that's always the other team's modus operandi. I still think about that hit that got laid on McDavid in the Four Nations, by the way, by McAvoy.
Charlie McAvoy?
Oh my God,
yeah.
That was the hardest I think I've ever seen McDavid get rocked by anybody. Maybe in his career.
It was like when Ovechkin caught Yager at the Olympics. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, it really was.
We're not used to seeing him.
You take a step back, you're just like, wait a second, you could do that?
You're allowed to do that to him? Really?
I mean,
everybody
in
else.
McDavid's case, it's more like the Gretzky thing where it's just like, how do you hit what you can't catch? Yeah. But yeah, I was still like taken aback by how hard he got hit. I think in Frederic's case, look, they needed some grit down the lineup. I think they're wagering on maybe the offensive decline that we've seen from him. You know, last 2 years, if prior to this one, it looked like he was elevating up to being a pretty serviceable offensive player.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just a product this season of the overall malaise on the Bruins offensively. The thing I like about it too is that he also kills penalties pretty well. And don't look now, but the Oilers are terrible at it. So I think it's one of those deals where, you know, it's like everything. I love this. My favorite thing at the trade deadline is like checking the boxes. It's like, oh, why this guy? Oh, size, check. You can skate, check. Maybe he's got offensive upside, check. Can help on the penalty kill, check. Like it's a really good jack of all trades acquisition for Stan Bowman, and on top of it, not costing them anything from a cap perspective.
Now, listen, everything with the Oilers right now needs to sort of filter through the lens of what's happening with Evander Kane.
Right.
And listen, if Evander Kane can play, and you see Evander Kane and this, he's been off skates for a long time here, so there's going to be an element of catching up to the game. But all of a sudden, if you have like that Evander Kane that we've seen before, specifically in the playoffs, all of a sudden you've got a team that has just added, because they played without him all year, they've added Evander Kane and Trent Frederic into this lineup, and you're going against the Vegas Golden Knights, where everybody's big, and you're going against the Los Angeles Kings, you know, and like there's big, strong dudes. Right.
Yeah, but you're also just getting a first round bye if you play the Kings because you're the Oilers. Like, let's not forget about that. I mean, there's just the mastery of that team that they have in the playoffs.
I get it.
You think it's gonna be different this time?
I don't know. Like, does it have to end? Like, I know there's an element of like Globetrotters, Washington Generals here, but are they not due at some point to do something?
I mean, the effect of that postseason dominance is a two-way street. I mean, how many times, like, what's the reaction for the Kings when they, you know, get in the first round and look across the ice and it's Connor and Leon again? Like, it's probably the same sort of, you know, nightmarish Groundhog Day for them as it is the Oilers feeling confident they can pass through that series. But you're right. I mean, I
think it's about Vegas. I honestly, I think it's like, look, if we're gonna do something, we're going through Vegas here, and we need to like go right up into their face and say, "Anytime, big boy, anytime, big boy." And now we got someone that can say, "Anytime, big boy."
So before I forget on Vegas, like I've been asked a bunch of times by people, what team am I most interested in at the deadline, or like what GM do I think is going to make the kookiest trade? The answer is always Vegas. Like even
yes,
with their resources and their assets and their cap situation, like all that stuff, like you just know they're going to do something. And here's where I will note that there are exactly 2 players on everybody's big board that did play for the Brandon Wheat Kings. That would be Braden Shen and I. And,
it's not that easy for those.
For those,
the joke that Greg is making here is Kelly McCrimmon, the GM of the Vegas Golden Knights, used to own and manage the Brandon Wheat Kings and graduated a lot of players very successfully to the NHL. And as a matter of fact, the first player ever signed by the Vegas Golden Knights was a member of the Brandon Wheat Kings. That was a tip, of course, to Kelly McCrimmon. But nonetheless, there
Mark
has
Stone.
I know. I get it. I understand. Look, I think that's always the team that pulls that. Listen, I think we can all remember, sitting on the set at the old shop when all of a sudden Bob McKenzie jumps up on TSN. All of a sudden he shakes off the cobwebs and Tomas Hertl to Vegas. Peace out. Well, we're all like, what?
He stops the blender. And he's like, hey, by the way, anyone need a lime? Oh, by the way, Thomas Hertl to the Golden Knights. No, exactly. That's what makes it fun. And by the way, Florida has basically become Vegas East, right? As far as, not only dipping into the Kelly McCrimmon playbook by putting Matthew Tkachuk on LTIR until game 1 of the playoffs, which isn't anything nefarious. Maybe they're flexing a little bit on when he could return and that kind of thing, but it's a legit injury and one I think everybody's kind of concerned as far as like when he'll return. But the Seth Jones trade, figuring out a way to get him in and get him under the cap and having Chicago retain 2.5 until 2030. The unfeeling nature, or I shouldn't say unfeeling, but like the confident nature in the way that they're handling Ekblad, in the sense of like, well, big boy, we know you want to stay here. And if you do, then you'll come in at this number. And if you don't, then it's been nice knowing you. Like, that's the kind of business that you expect out of Vegas. Like you have a beautiful house in Summerlin. The weather is always nice. If you want to stay, you're more than welcome. It just has to be at this number. And now I feel like Florida is in the same way. They're in the same mode as what Vegas does, and it's what champions do.
I was asking on the program yesterday, speaking of Matthew Tkachuk, and I did think of you when I posted, because I'm like, this is such a Wyshynski thing, and if Wyshynski were in the scrum, he would totally ask this question. I was just dying for someone yesterday after that Tampa Florida game to ask Nikita Kucherov what he thought about Matthew Tkachuk going on LTIR.
Oh, that would have been great.
Please. So, Nikita, Matthew Tkachuk's at LTIR. Do you have a comment or a thought on that one, sir? Or a T-shirt for that one yet? Or a hat? Anything? You have anything made up? Please. Something. Anything.
It's just so funny how I haven't talked to you since the Seth Jones thing went down, but like, it's just so funny how that everyone just assumed, okay, if he goes anywhere, it's either going to be Dallas, where he grew up, or it was going to be Florida, where Billy Zito was, who was there when they acquired him in Columbus, and lo and behold, it was one of the two. I predicted before the season that Seth Jones would get traded. I added a third possibility, which was Edmonton, because that's where Stan Bowman was. But I should have known it was going to end up being Florida. Like, I should have known that based on the state of their defense and the fact that Zito was there. That was the logical destination, I thought. Once I thought about it,
one of the things that we were talking about on the show last week that I wondered about with Seth Jones, and first of all, bravo to Kyle Davidson. I don't think anyone thought that Kyle Davidson was essentially going to grab 2 first-round picks for Seth Jones, which is what he did. And Spencer Knight looked fantastic last night, and all of a sudden, Drew Comesso is calling his agent, trade me right effing now. But here's what I wondered about on the show last week. Because you're right, like there was a very limited amount of teams that he was going to go to here, and it was obvious. I don't think that Dallas was going to pay anything near what Bill Zito in Florida did.
No.
But if there wasn't a market for him at all and they didn't want to give him away, or they couldn't give him away, what I had wondered about was a mutual termination. If the agent believed there was a 5x7 out there in the marketplace, Could that be something that Chicago and CAA with Seth Jones would have entertained? Because it would have taken everybody. And now it's moot now. It's moot now. It's moot now. I did wonder if that, as weird as it sounds, like who's walking away from $36 million? But it could have made sense if you believe that there was 5 times 7 out there.
And I think there was 5 times 7 out there based on where the cap's going. And
yes,
and I mean, like he's still I think we'll find out a lot in Florida because he's going to be in a better situation. I think he's going to probably be with better coaches, if I'm being honest with you, as far as defensemen go there too. Like I'm intrigued to see if at this point in Seth's career he's just a second pairing D that's pretty effective, or if he could be a top guy again. And we'll find out pretty quickly, I think, in Florida. But yeah, I think he probably finds a 5 times 7 somewhere out there if they went the termination route, and that's probably where they were headed, to be honest with you, dude, because he wasn't going to stop complaining. I mean, like kudos to Seth Jones and his representatives, who at some point were just like, we've been asking since November, and now we're going to put the screws to him. Now we're going to put the pressure on. The deadline is next Friday. It's time to start. We were probably 2 days away from him walking around with a picket sign in the locker room saying, trade Seth now.
Sandwich board. Like a sandwich board walking around the room.
Like he was there for it. And I give him credit. It worked. It worked to the point where they retained salary on him through 2030, which I honestly didn't think they'd do. To get him off the books and get him out of the locker room.
Couple of things there. One, cap's going up. Two, I wonder how much of that is a wink at, look, we're not planning to be good anytime soon. We understand the reality that this thing's not going to turn around fast. That is still going to be some years
for the sake of your other guy that's going to start making noise about getting out of there soon.
Maybe he gets a sandwich board. Maybe he gets a sandwich board then. But you know what? Having said that,
Connor Bedard has shown. Hold on, Connor Bedard has shown no compunction about being vocal about his lot in life right now. Like of all the guys that we've talked about through the years, McDavid and others who were going to complain and raise a stink about the state of their team, like Bedard's the first guy that I'm kind of convinced will do it. Like I watched this kid and operate and talk and everything else, and like I don't think he's got loyalty to the crest. I think Connor Bedard wants to be on a winning team, and if he thinks that this team is being mismanaged to high hell over the next 2 to 3 years, I think he's going to be the guy to be like, get me out of here.
I disagree with that, and again, this is only based on track record that we've seen with Bedard before he entered the NHL. It would have been easy for him when he played junior hockey to say, you know what, just get me to Kamloops. Guaranteed Memorial Cup, etc., going in the back, all of it, and he refused. He refused to entertain it, don't want to do it. This is the team that drafted me. This is the team that I've always been with. This is, like, the calling card, you remember his draft going into it was how loyal. Like, everybody in the Western League would have been like, let's get to, like, whatever it takes, get this guy into the Memorial Cup. And John Paddock was always, no, we're not going to do that because Bedard doesn't want to do that. Like, his calling card was, it's going to be great starting a rebuild with this kid because he's intensely loyal. Okay. That was who he was. That's why I have a hard time saying, like, all of a sudden now he's going to go like, hey, Seth, can I see that playbook? Like, did you write it down? Like, how did you stagger out, like, when you said it, who you said it to, like, how you put the breadcrumbs around to let everybody know that you wanted out of here? That's not really been Connor Bedard. It's never been him.
He's got no loyalty to this franchise whatsoever. In fact, I think if anything, they've done him wrong with the way that they've constructed the team around him and the decisions they've made in service of his tenure with Chicago. So I think if anything, he's got a gripe. I think there's a little bit of projection on my part on this. I'll be honest with you, because I'm waiting for the first guy to be like, no, actually, it's the name on the back. It's not the logo on the front. I'm a brand. I'm a star. I am more important than this franchise is at the moment. And you got to do right by me. And I want to believe that's Bedard. I want to believe within 2 to 3 years, if the Blackhawks are still a dumpster fire, and he doesn't have his Nick Backstrom there, or his Evgeny Malkin, or his Chris Letang, like other phenom players have had. He doesn't even have the cast that Connor had in Edmonton. I want to believe that Bedard will be the first guy to be like, I am not sitting on my thumbs waiting for you to figure this out. Get me out of here. Get me to a team that knows what the hell they're doing.
That's never been him. We'll see.
There's never been any player.
See. I just don't know.
Like, McDavid would have been the one to do it. the only reason Eichel did it is because they wouldn't give him the surgery.
That's the ADR. That was the ADR.
Right.
That was
right.
ADR
So
surgery.
I know that's not what a lot of hockey fans want to hear, because we all like the idea of the drafted player being loyal to the team until he's 27, and that's how the system works, and how everybody is humble, and when it's not the NBA. The NBA guys don't even want to play in the All-Star game, says the critics of the NBA All-Star game, who are also NHL people who should know we actually had to invent a rule to make sure players showed up to the NHL All-Star game. It drove me mental. I like PK. He's a colleague. Stop trying to put over the NHL players like there's some sort of better cut of moral athlete, when we literally had to invent a rule to make sure they showed up to the All-Star game or they got suspended.
And some of them just chose to get suspended. But the thing is,
Crosby was the biggest star in the world, and he didn't show up to the All-Star game on the reg during his prime years. Sometimes due to injury, sometimes because he didn't want to show up. I can't believe we do this please like my sport thing all the time in this sport. Stop doing it. Anyway, back to the ledger at hand. I want Bedard to ask out. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know how we got to Connor Bedard asking to be traded out of Chicago, and we started by talking about Trent Frederic and the trades.
Yeah, I know. This is really getting in the way of what I promised. I promised the listeners we were going to do all 32 teams in 50 minutes. I don't know if we're going to get there.
Let me speculate on something here. I was having this conversation last night with someone watching the Ottawa-Washington game, and most specifically watching the anthem. And watching the reactions from certain players during the U.S. anthem, and how the U.S. anthem is treated in the nation's capital. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Oh, after all, this is only the first day of tariffs. We don't know what tomorrow's going to be like. Oh boy, we can't wait to open every day's tariff Christmas. But Brady Tkachuk probably tried not to have this expression when they were booing the U.S. national anthem. I think there are some players that can shake it off, but coming out of four nations specifically, the Tkachuk brothers are Captains America now. One person said to me, are the Ottawa Senators fans going to essentially boo the anthem and Brady Tkachuk out of Ottawa?
Oh my God. We're really doing this.
Yep.
Brady Tkachuk would ask out of Ottawa because the anthem is being booed, because a song is being booed beforehand?
I just thought, listen, as a Canadian, I don't know where this thing is going. All I know is the booing is not going to stop whatsoever.
Yeah.
And whether it's Quinn Hughes, Austin Matthews, or Brady Tkachuk, U.S. captains on Canadian teams, it's going to be really uncomfortable for them, for all American players through all of this. Look, I don't know how Brady Tkachuk specifically feels about this. I don't know how Big Walt feels about this too. But as Matthew Tkachuk once told me, when you negotiate with one Tkachuk, you negotiate with all of them. All decisions are family decisions. I don't know how that family feels about this dynamic in Canada. And I do wonder what this means because it's already a challenge for Canadian teams to sign U.S. free agents if this complicates things even further.
Well, what you're essentially saying is you don't know if they're meatheads that don't understand why the anthem's being booed. You're wondering if they're the type of people.
No. What I'm saying is I don't know that they want to be part of that. Again, I'm not an American hockey player, so I don't know.
Part of what? We all
part
know
of
why
standing on the line
anthem.
as an American player while the anthem is booed. I do. Listen, but as a Canadian, I know where this is directed. Are we going to kayfabe
it as some sort of USA-Canada rivalry, or are we going to admit why it's happening? And I think most players understand why it's happening, especially Canadian players understand why it's happening. And it could be framed in the Fox News way of they're disrespecting the veterans, but I would hope that most of these guys have at least half a brain to understand that it's happening as a protest towards what the American president is doing to the country you're playing in. And if you want out because of that, I don't know what to tell you. It's not because Ottawa fans are driving you out. It's maybe because life has become uncomfortable for you culturally in this country, in Canada, because of the actions of the United States.
I never would have said it if he wouldn't have. If he just would have been standing on the blue line for it, just dog-faced. But that wasn't it.
Well, I mean, again, like, I guess the problem I have with this whole line of thinking, Marek, is that I feel like you are kind of soft-shoeing a criticism of the fans and saying
How so?
the actions that you are taking against the anthem may in fact drive your captain out of the country. I mean, that's kind of the unsaid part of this, right?
Yeah.
How is that possibly fair to Canadian fans?
All I'm saying is, I don't think it's deliberate, but do you not see that as part of the like none of this is happening in a vacuum. Like there's a cascading effect that happens when you do something like that. The law of unintended and unforeseen circumstances here.
Sure, but what's the alternative? To
listen,
the rink and
I'm with you.
Jerseys.
Listen, I'm with you. Trust me, I'm with you on this one. And we all know, we've all tried to thread this needle with a lot of our friends, American friends here in Canada, and I've gone out of my way to try to say, look, we don't hate Americans. We hate an American. There is one, and what his administration is doing to Canadians, that is what this is being vented towards. All I'm saying is, like, I saw that reaction last night from Brady Tkachuk. I'm thinking to myself, is it possible that it becomes a log on the fire that just burns too hot? Because who knows where? Listen, we don't know. Again, this is tariff day one.
No,
we don't know. We don't know where this is going.
Know.
We don't know where this is going. But already here we are, day one into it. The relationship between the United States and Canada is more fractured than we've ever seen it before. And here we are. We don't know where this is heading.
Let me continue with the grand tradition of this episode of MBSW by continuing to project myself onto NHL players. Maybe there is a little bit of introspection in Brady Tkachuk or any American playing in Canada that you are upset about being put in this position. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with the Tkachuks. I tend to believe that maybe my political ideology does not align with the Tkachuks, somewhat. But maybe there's a thought of just like how rotten this entire situation is for all involved. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's where your discontent comes in. And maybe when you feel that way about the way of the world, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking to pack your bags and go back to the United States. It just means like, what a bummer it is that I'm a professional athlete and I got to hear my anthem get booed because of the actions of the country in which I'm from. Wouldn't that be? I know it's very Pollyanna of me. But maybe there's one or two Americans playing in Canada that feel that way.
Comment dit en français, tu rêves en couleur. You dream in Technicolor. But okay,
I certainly do.
So one more thing about Brady Tkachuk yesterday. So he fights Tom Wilson. Good fight too. Brady Tkachuk did real good against a real tough guy.
On top.
Yeah. Do you think part of that was, because it was the first thing that I thought of, there's a lot of clamor about, oh, you know what? The Tkachuks never would have done that if Tom Wilson was in the lineup at Four Nations. Nope. It's one thing to go fight Brandon Hagel and go fight Sammy Bennett. All right. That's fine. But if Tom Wilson was there, those Tkachuk boys would have thought twice. I think part of that was Brady saying, oh, yeah? Here's what I think about that. We still would have fought if it was Tom Wilson. Do you think that any of what we saw, that this was the fumes from the Four Nation and the dialogue that has been, the Tkachuk brothers wouldn't have done that if Tom Wilson was on Team Canada?
That's funny because I saw some takes last night being like, did Tom Wilson fight Brady Tkachuk to plant his flag and say you should have had me on Team Canada because this thing wouldn't have happened? But you're taking the opposite tack.
Taking the opposite.
Brady,
I think it was Tkachuk.
Brady taking on Wilson to show that it was. I love that idea.
Yes, that's what
I'll get down with that. I can't get down with the other thing because the reason this fight happened is because Wilson was going after Giroux. But I like the idea of Brady taking the fight and saying let's go as a way to say it doesn't matter if you were on Team Canada, I still would have thrown down. I like that. I'll get down with that.
Honestly, that was my first thought. Like, enough of this. Like, we wouldn't have done this if Tom Wilson was in there. It's interesting.
Look, here's the thing. Here's the thing about Brady. Like, I talked to him about this when I wrote about him earlier this year. Like, I do feel bad for him because even before all the tariff stuff and the 51st state stuff and the booing of the anthem stuff, there were still people trying to send SEAL Team 6 in to extract him from Ottawa. Like, this is not a new thing. This idea,
I believe the owner referenced that.
Brady Tkachuk is discontent in Ottawa is not a new thing. It predates all of this mess. It's why his owner had to come out with the soft tampering stuff. And I feel like whether there's anthem booing or not, the trend of let's get Brady Tkachuk out of Ottawa would have happened anyway. And I feel bad for him because he's the target of other people's desires at all times. And all he wants to do is put his head down and get his team into the playoffs.
As producer Zach mentions in the chat, it did give us one of the great terms now of all time in hockey: soft tampering.
Soft tampering,
light treason, soft tampering.
Hey, listen, man. After James Dolan probably settled in to watch Four Nations with a frosty beverage, I think we're gonna get some hard tampering this summer, baby. I think the Rangers look at that roster and say JT Miller and Brady Tkachuk on the same team. We will become a blunt instrument of bludgeoning in the Eastern Conference and win a Stanley Cup. Is how they probably feel right now.
So I had Chris Patrick on the program yesterday, and you will be very proud of me. I only asked one question about the Patrick family. I was very tame. There was not a lot of Lester and Frank. I was like, okay, not the forum, not the venue. That's more for long form. If I ever get a chance to do that with Chris, you would have been very impressed at how calm I was about the history of the first family of hockey. But, I brought up the idea that for Washington, it's my belief it's going to be more about tweak than trade deadline. And he seems sort of on par with that. I do wonder the same thing with the Winnipeg Jets. Like, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, you say to yourself, would we like a stronger 2C instead of Vlad Namestnikov here? Even though Vlad Namestnikov is working very well, thank you very much, as our 2C on this team. Yeah, maybe. But there are just some teams where the strength of the team is the vibes. It just all works. Like, would they like more giants on the back end? Probably. It is a small-ish blue line. We know what that can mean in the playoffs sometimes. But I look at Cheveldayoff and I look at Patrick and I say, those are the two GMs that are most of the mind. Yeah, we'd maybe like to reward the team for the success so far, but we don't want to wreck any of this. What we want for deadline is health. Can we trade for health? Can someone please trade health to us? That's what we want.
I think you're right on the Capitals. I do. And by the way, I love Patrick. I think he's a good dude who deserved a shot at being GM. I had a really good chat with him earlier this season about the Dubois trade and kind of like what had to happen internally for them to figure out that that's the right decision. And I love the idea of that him going to Spencer Carberry and basically being like, all right, I have this on the table, but you've got to sign off on it because you're the one who has to work with him every day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how that trade happened. I'll throw you one caveat.
Okay.
I think Brock Nelson would be really, really perfect for Winnipeg. Really, really perfect.
Okay.
As a second line center behind Scheifele, but more than that, to strategically keep him off the Avalanche and to strategically keep him off the Wild. Like, I think that's, if they could finagle it, and after Monday's debacle at MSG, I think the Islanders should probably be in the cellar mode. Yeah. I think that's a really good fit for them if they could pull Brock Nelson out of New York.
I've always been of the belief that, like, once upon a time, if you didn't have like max 50 contracts and you didn't have a salary cap, you could do things like that. Just trade. And listen, we're the same vintage. Remember trades like that before. Why'd you make that trade? Oh, to keep him away from this team. I just think that in a salary cap era, listen, you're hearkening back to my youth, and I love those deals. It's like they're just doing this to keep this player away from another team. You don't see that because
that's part of it, though.
You tend to get in trouble when you tend to get in trouble when it's like, yeah, we kind of like this guy, but we really don't want him on Colorado, so we're going to make this move, as opposed to we're making this move just to help ourselves.
I understand, and also, I was talking to a GM the other day, and I actually asked him because I was curious, do you ever make trades with your first round opponent in mind? And he's like, it's a great theory, but no. You can't approach the deadline thinking, okay, we're going to do that, which obviously like impacts our Vegas theory for Edmonton, but still that's kind of like what the dude told me. I'm not saying that you'd get Nelson specifically just to keep him away from your divisional opponents. I also happen to think that getting a 200-foot center who can do the offensive things that Brock Nelson can do is a really good fit for that Winnipeg team that I think lacks that true standout to see behind Scheifele. I'm not saying, I don't know. I haven't worked the cap numbers to see if it makes sense, but I just think from a functional standpoint, I like that fit. But the thing I wanted to ask you, because you brought up Washington and Winnipeg, I've been thinking a lot about this recently. These are the two teams that have been trading first place in the NHL throughout the season. Like, they are clearly the two best regular season teams, and there shouldn't even be any debate about it. Have you met a single person that's picking either of them to win the cup right now?
Nope.
Why is that?
Because
I know why that is for Winnipeg, because they have to still prove they can get past the first round. They went out in 5 consecutive seasons.
Yeah,
right,
Hellebuyck
exactly.
Too, yeah.
Although after 4 Nations, I mean, he is the best goalie in the world.
It's 4 games. That one shot. We've made so much. Like, I love hearing people talk about how 4 Nations completely changed their outlook on certain players. 4 freaking games. Come on. Listen, I get it. Like, good on Jordan Binnington and good on Connor Hellebuyck.
Yep.
It's 4 games. Right? You want to win the Stanley Cup, you got to win 16 games. Now, I know it was the elite of the elite and all that, and blah, 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 but it's 4 games. Like, if you're going to allow your perception of a hockey player to profoundly change after 4 games, I might want to say, calm down a little bit.
I understand what you're saying. I think you're wrong, and I'll give you the reason, which is that my perception of Brandon Hagel before 4 Nations was just a very good winger on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Yeah. My perception after it is that man loves his country more than a Mountie. My perception of Brandon Hagel.
More than a Mountie. Okay, that's really good. Well, no, because there's an element for both those teams, and we're running along here. There's an element of both those teams where everybody's waiting for the clock to strike midnight.
Correct.
There is a very much a 2006 Carolina Hurricanes element about it, where you remember the Hurricanes. Now, a lot of this is just coming out of the lockout and everyone's relearning how to play the game, but blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, Carolina starts piling up wins early in the season. And everyone's like, oh, that's cute, but they're going to tail off. And then December rolls around, they're still in first place. And it carries on, and Rutherford starts making moves. And next thing you know, even though they're down, I think they went down 2-0 to Montreal in that opening series, and they switched goaltenders, and all of a sudden it was a rocket attached to them. And we're talking about, so who's going to get the Conn Smythe, and should Corey Stillman get more consideration than he's getting? I think there's that element of both these teams. You're just waiting for it to be stopped because their fan bases have been false started so many times. But I think
I like your metaphor because the idea that the 2 best teams in the league are also Cinderella teams, in the sense that you're waiting for the clock to strike midnight, is kind of an amazing concept. But you're not wrong. Which of those 2 teams do you have more faith in to win the Stanley Cup this season?
I would say Washington.
I would too.
I have more faith in the Caps. Even though Connor Hellebuyck is also having one of those, like, win the Vezina, win the Hart, win all the trophies you're up for.
Yeah. And I think their underlying numbers are better than those in Washington too, if memory serves. But, and I might be wrong on that. I haven't checked in on the analytics for both those teams in a while. But I think Washington, I like their depth. And I do think that although they have Hellebuyck, the Capitals' goaltending is no slouch.
Yeah, it's good. Both right catch.
The fact that Ovechkin doesn't look like he's being operated by a system of levers and pulleys is good. He looks like a viable player in the playoffs. Yeah. And also, I think the biggest point of demarcation for me is the path. Like, the Jets are going to have to go through the Avalanche at some point. And they're going to have to go through Edmonton or Vegas at some point. And the Capitals are in a pretty, due respect to Florida, which is probably the best team in the East right now on paper. But Dallas, exactly, in the West. Like, the Capitals don't have that same path. So I would say by virtue of this, just that, they'd probably be my pick as well.
Real quick here. EVP in the chat. This is one that tickle you under your chin. The handshake celebration that we showed earlier, Cliff Poo and Max Jones, my favorite ever, is the cordial, logical conclusion to the Yager salute. Random Penguin, Ruslan Fedotenko. Just thought I'd throw that.
That's right. A salute, a firm handshake. Exactly. I like it. I think that's a great celebration. Give me that.
Yeah.
Give me that all the time. Wait. By the way, what happened to goal celebrations? I saw Patrick Kane celebrate during the Stadium Series, which, by the way, was amazing. We didn't even talk about that. I was there.
Really good. It was cool.
Saturday. It was insanely fun. And then
Detroit looked really good, by the way. Like, oh man, I felt Detroit looked awesome
in the third.
I'm like, okay, there's no way, but hey, man, good on Elvis Merzlikins.
We need better celebrations. Before I forget, real quick, because I know we got to go. 94,000 people. I having been on site, 85-15 split maybe. Blue Jackets fans and Red Wings fans. That is a wonderful, wonderful moment for Columbus hockey. We've talked about it on the show many times about how that's a market that's ready to pop as soon as that team gets good for a prolonged period of time. And that was on full display on Saturday, and they're doing it right. Like, they're going to be good for a while with Fantilli and Johnson and Werenski, and like they're building it right. And I was just so overjoyed for that market to get its moment. It's waited so long for it.
The only problem is I want to nitpick this one. I hope that, first of all, I hope this is real. I hope this is sustainable. And I hope, like, to your point, like, all these guys are legit and all of a sudden this team has really flipped the page. The only problem is Pittsburgh's not going to be there for them. The Penguins aren't good. That's the rivalry. That's the one you want. Columbus, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the one you need. Pittsburgh's not gonna be there for it.
My nitpick obviously is that they had the sport's most incredible phallic mascot and decided they were gonna not use it anymore. Boomer was R.I.P. Boomer, my favorite NHL mascot of all time. You didn't notice what the wheels look like with the cannon?
I know.
Notice?
Listen, you're talking to a guy. You're talking to a guy from Toronto who has a CN Tower right beside the Sky Dome. All right, so like, come on, I get it. All right, on that, we'll bid you good day, good sir. I virtually shake your hand like Cliff Poo and Max Jones. The Yager salute.
Shake your hand.
Very good. There he is from
Thanks,
ESPN.
everybody.
Our good friend Greg Wyshynski joins us every Tuesday here on the sheet. And glad we got in the Random Penguin. That for you old school MVSWers. Okay, a couple of things before I wrap up here today. FanDuel, proud to connect fans to the major sports moments that matter to them. Roster updates. We got some games tonight, folks. From Daily Faceoff's Fantasy Twitter/X feed. And Zach, I don't know if you have a thought on a couple of these along the way. 10 games on the board tonight, Zacharoo. Nashville and Boston. Now Boston without the services of Trent Frederic, who's still banged up, but still. Listen, the Brad Marchand cloud week to week. I mean, that's a tough one. Brandon Carlo, Morgan Geekie, Justin Brazo. Nashville's already made a move. Gustav Nyquist to Minnesota. You wonder about Luke Shen. You wonder about Ryan O'Reilly, and you wonder what has happened to Steven Stamkos, who is pointless in 13 games.
Yeah.
And Yossi's injured for a little bit of spice too.
Yeah, I heard a line the other day. It was Brian Hayes. It was pretty funny. He said something along the lines of, the money may be greener, but is the grass. Something like that, because he's talking about Stamkos. I was laughing at that. I'm like, that's a pretty good line. I'm looking at this guy, the struggles they've had this season, and just kind of wondering how they move those pieces out and move forward with some stuff. Luke Shen seems like the obvious one who's going to go, but... interesting game for me that I'm looking at tonight, Columbus and Tampa. Tampa back-to-back, still chasing some points here. That race in the Atlantic at the top there is heating up, but Columbus needs points, and there were some pretty decent-sized underdogs today when I was looking at betting it this morning.
Oh, yeah? Well, I mean, listen, the Jackets have won 4 in a row. The big pair against the Detroit Red Wings. Ivan Provorov without contract. I wonder if Don Waddell just lets that go and rides this wonderful season without a contract extension. Aaron Portzline saying they're not close on a deal. But it sounds like, and I talked to someone in Columbus or texted with someone in Columbus today, it sounds like Matthew Olivier is very close. So, like with one of the great luxury items in the NHL, Matthew Olivier, back with the Columbus Blue Jackets. You mentioned Tampa losing to Florida. 8-game winning streak is over. But I've said it to you before. It is the fool that bets against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Don't do it.
I may be that fool.
All been fooled betting against Tampa. One thing really quick. San Jose and Buffalo at the KeyBank Center. San Jose coming off that big win last night against who?
I don't know.
Big Blue. You're Big Blue. You're Big Blue.
Oh, that game.
Yeah. And we wonder about the Sharks, and we wonder about Nico Sturm, and we wonder about Luke Cunnin, and we wonder about Mario Ferraro, who got into one last night. Look at Mario. King City boy goes back to Toronto and gets in a fight right away. We wonder about the Buffalo Sabres and what they're going to do. Buffalo could do anything. I think a lot of things are on the table for the Buffalo Sabres. We'll see which direction Kevyn Adams goes. I am led to believe, however, that Jason Zucker is more likely to be re-signed with term than be moved. Like we always say, it could all change with one phone call, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm of the belief that it looks like he's probably going to re-sign with Buffalo.
Okay, look, I need to get this off my chest. There's some things here where I just put my head down and say, hey, you know what? You guys are smarter than me. You are very much in that boat, and I just let you tell me some stuff, and I say, okay, yep, fair.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't know what the fuck the Buffalo Sabres are doing. I honestly, I can't understand some of the stuff. I hear players that are out there that could potentially be traded. It's young guys. Oh, Jason Zucker makes sense, like he would be moved. Nope, he's going to sign a long-term extension.
I could see it.
Like I just look around, I understand that basically, like it could happen, but why? What is the plan? What is the plan?
I'll tell you exactly what the issue is with the Buffalo Sabres. First of all, everyone's playing one spot too high than they should be, and two. You know what the Buffalo Sabres are the story of? The Buffalo Sabres are the story of players that were rushed to the NHL. That players that didn't spend enough time in the American League or back in junior, they were just rushed right into the NHL. And I don't know if, because you always wonder what informs a general manager's thought process. And Kevyn Adams would have been there for like Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews in Chicago, just jumping right into the Blackhawks lineup and having an impact and a positive net result for the Blackhawks. And maybe that sort of skews your idea of like how effective a young player can be right away. But these are two Hall of Famers that we're talking about here. I'm just wondering if this is part of, what fuels that thought process. But go up and down the lineup and look at how many players were either rushed or didn't spend enough time playing in Rochester. And it's just like, boom, throw him in there. Just get him in.
And I
almost did it with Devin Levi. They almost did it with Devin Levi. Best place for Devin Levi, where he is. Until Montreal offer sheets him in the offseason.
Okay.
See if anyone's paying attention.
But like I just look at it. Do you think the solution to solving this? I mean, I'm sorry, Kevyn Adams, but the trades with Jack Eichel and Reinhart, that those went so well. You should consider trading your young guys again and signing Jason Zucker. Those are the ones that I look at I just say, why? How is that the solution?
I don't mind Zucker, and here's why. You do need veterans around, and like good veterans around kids. I got no problem with Jason Zucker signing long term with the Buffalo Sabres. Oh, you can't just.
I want to also clarify.
I
don't either. Yes, I want to clarify. I don't either. I'm more so coinciding with this idea of trading off Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram and like these young kids who are thrown out there, and I'm like, what? This seems bass backwards here right now.
That's been Buffalo for a while. To me, again, like at the beginning of the season, the expectation was playoffs or also is going to be consequences. There will be no playoffs for the Buffalo Sabres. I'm already at the point of, okay, what are the consequences going to be? And and if not, why have things changed? Why have things changed with the Swords? Carolina, Detroit. Detroit's in a dogfight right now. There's them. There's Columbus. There's the Rangers. There's the Bruins. There's Ottawa. There's the Habs. All of a sudden, you see Nick Suzuki's got like 13 points in 5 games. Nick Suzuki's come out of the Four Nations like, oh, okay, so you didn't like that I didn't go to the World Championships. You want to leave me off? Yeah, okay, well, that's fine. I'm just going to come and I'm going to light it up for the Montreal Canadiens, and that's changed thoughts now. And all of a sudden, Jake Evans goes from a trade target for the Montreal Canadiens to a contract extension. Take him off the board. All of a sudden, like Montreal's throwing a wrench into all of this.
Pretty good deal too, I thought. Like I kind of expecting maybe a couple years, 3.5. They get him for what was it, 4 by 2.85.
Yeah,
that's tidy work. Honestly.
Yeah, like I don't know, man. That's a good one. Good news for the Dallas Stars. Liam Bichelle is back in. Brendan Smith is out. They're facing off against New Jersey tonight. Listen, Jim Nill is still beating the bushes and making the calls and trying to get things done for the Dallas Stars. Pittsburgh versus Colorado. Don't see any storylines here.
Where is this one tonight? I didn't check. Sorry. Is it in Pittsburgh?
It's in Colorado. It's in Colorado. Is it gonna be the We Want Crosby chance?
Do you think Sid brought a big suitcase with him?
Oh man, it's so funny. There've been so many stories. I remember who was it? There was one guy on St. Louis. I can't remember who it was, who packed for a road trip around trade deadline. I remember I got a call from someone and with the Blues going like, I've never seen anyone take this much luggage on a road trip before. Just anticipating, he didn't end up getting traded. Just anticipating that he was going to be left somewhere.
That's what I need.
By trade
Suitcase
deadline.
gate. The photos of them getting off the planes and the social media team. I need like inspection of Sid's suitcase versus his normal suitcase. Sid's suitcase versus the other guy's suitcases.
Why is Sid taking so many sticks? How many sticks does Sid need?
Why is Sid's bag no name? Why is there no logo or brand on that thing?
It's a black bag. What's going on, Cross?
Yeah.
Anaheim, Edmonton. We wonder about Brian Dumoulin with the, I know not the big sexy name, but I think it's safe to say that Brian Dumoulin is probably on his way out in Anaheim. Calvin Pickard starts. Matthew Savoy is in. Jeff Skinner is out on this one. Did we mention that Trent Frederic is now a member along with Max Jones of the Edmonton Oilers, and Minnesota faces off against Seattle at Climate Pledge Arena. And there's a program for the day. Thanks to Greg Wyshynski from ESPN for stopping by on Tuesday, as he always does. Any closing thoughts, Zacharoo?
I got one final beef, and I want to know what your thoughts are on this. It comes up all the time right now. Okay. Wow, that's clever. This is my beef. I think it's extremely. Yeah, I'm supposed to be doing the sound effects. I'm the producer.
Okay, I apologize. What I really want to do.
I think it's extremely overplayed. Extremely, especially at this time of the year, and sometimes really bothers me.
Yep.
Well, he's never won a Stanley Cup. Can you trust? Is that the guy
Rings in the room?
Locker room?
Rings in the room.
You can't win a Stanley. You can't be a guy who's won a Stanley Cup until you've won the Stanley Cup. Like Braden Shen was not a guy who won a Stanley Cup until he won the Stanley Cup. Does that mean before he won the Stanley Cup? No, we can't bring a guy like that in here. He doesn't have the ring. I understand adding players who have had it, but I don't think that we should elevate this importance at this time of year. It gets out of hand.
I don't necessarily disagree. Having said that, when I think rings in the room right around this time of the year, like right now, I do really wonder. I think I threw this in the blog a couple of weeks ago. I wonder if Tampa brings back Pat Maroon.
Oh.
You're going
kind of
through
makes
Florida.
sense, right?
You're going through Florida. They're looking for a winger. I really wonder if Tampa brings in Pat Maroon. I don't know. Just throw it out there. A little flavor puck. A little bit of spice for everyone. Just tickle your brain a little bit with that one. If it happens,
I like that.
Let's put it on a loop. And if it doesn't, let's forget we ever had
Clips.
this conversation. Okay? Very good.
Clips. We're getting Morning Cup of Hockey Boys to play it. I'm writing blogs.
That's right.
about
Yeah.
it.
Play this for Pat.
Gone. The end
Never
of the show
happened.
you're gonna find the show. It's clipped. It's shortened, cut down.
The show just ends. All right. Thanks to everyone in the chat, everyone watching live on our YouTube channel here on Daily Faceoff, everyone listening on podcast, your favorite podcatcher. On behalf of Zach Phillips, Marek signing off. We are back tomorrow with more trade talk. Listen, it's trade deadline, but all the trades aren't going to be made, as you know, on Friday. Plenty more will be made as the hours go by. Maybe by the time this show gets archived, there'll be 2 more and the show will be dated. So if you missed any of it, listen fast before none of it makes sense. How about that? Thanks for joining me. Back tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern. Don't forget tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. It is Morning Cup of Hockey. Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohen. At noon, DFO Live. And then our little act here at 3 o'clock Eastern. It's called The Sheet. Glad to have you aboard today, as always. We'll talk to you tomorrow. If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.